Okay, so today I would like to discuss something about average of a quantity. How is average defined? Because most of the times in physics we'll be using the terms like average speed or average velocity or average momentum or average force. So first we should know how to calculate the average. Suppose if I have a quantity q of t, what I mean by that is this quantity may be changing with time. This quantity could be changing with time. So this quantity could be either speed of a object, or it could be a vector quantity like velocity of an object, or it can be something like the work done by an object which can be changing with time, or whatever. It could be any quantity, any physical quantity which changes with time. Then if I want average value of q of t, average value of q of t from certain time t1 to another time t2. So the point to be noted here is average is calculated in a time interval. This is a time interval. So you must specify the starting and ending time in order to calculate the average. So average value of q of t is defined as integral of q of t, integrate q of t with respect to time from t1 to t2 and divide by the time difference. This is how average of the quantity is defined. So here I am assuming q of t is a scalar quantity because I have not put any arrow on q of t. But I could also define average of a vector quantity. Only thing is now you are integrating or adding vectors. For example, average of q of t. So I put an arrow on q to tell that it's a vector. And these two brackets, generally, we use them whenever we are finding the average. So that's, I can say, some kind of symbol to represent average. So average value of q of t. So I am writing here in English average value of a vector quantity q of t. Again, in the same line as scalar, we define it. You integrate that quantity with respect to time from some t1 to t2 and divide by time interval. So we are calculating the average here from time t1 to time t2. Average must always be calculated in a certain time span or a time interval. So we are doing that. So that's how you find average. Why is this average defined in this way? So let me try to give a sense of it. I would like to take the example of speed and give a sense of it because it makes more sense with that. For instance, suppose I am going from my house to, let us say, my coaching institute, and I am going in a bike, let us say, and my speed in the bike is changing continuously. Sometimes I am going with a huge speed. At a red signal, I am stopping, and sometimes I am going slow and so on. So my speed is changing with time. So I want to find the average speed. How do we find it? So what we are doing is we are integrating speed with respect to time from 0 to t seconds. Suppose I traveled for t seconds. It took t seconds for me to go from house to coaching. I could have taken in hours also, but I'm taking in seconds by total time. This is my average speed. Now, why are we defining average like this? So let's look at it from graph point of view. Suppose if I plot the graph of my speed with time, I started with 0, then I went with some different speeds, and again I came back to rest. Let me draw some nice figure, something like this. So my initial speed was 0. Finally also I came to rest, I stopped. Let's say in between I had somewhere maximum speed, then it also started decreasing. Now we will see later that this area under speed time graph gives you distance traveled. Distance traveled. Now if I had I gone with an average speed, with the same average speed from my house to coaching institute. So right now I am going with a speed which is changing continuously. But suppose I take another case where I went from my house to coaching institute with a fixed speed, constant speed, which happens to be equal to the average speed that I calculated. Now you would see that still I would take same time. Suppose if I took some t seconds here to go from my house to coaching institute with variable speed, even if I went with that constant speed, and if I take still the same t seconds, then that constant speed is called average speed. So I would write here, I went from my house to coaching institute in t seconds. And how did I go? My speed was continuously changing. Now there is another scenario where I went from my house to coaching in t seconds. Again I took t seconds only, but with a constant speed. I did not change the speed now. I went with a constant speed, but somehow I took again same time t seconds. Then this constant speed with which you have to go to reach in the same time, that's called average speed. So average speed, if you were to go with that average value without changing the value, if you were to go with that constant speed called average speed, and if you multiply with time, you would still travel the same distance as if you were to go with a variable speed. So I'm equating the distance traveled in both cases. In one case I am going with a variable speed, in another case I am going with a constant speed, which happens to be called the average. So from here you can see the definition. So V average comes out to be integral 0 to t v dt by t minus 0. Or if you look from graph point of view, suppose if I take a speed time graph and I went with a variable speed, there is some area which is distance traveled. Now suppose I want to draw another graph where I fix the speed and it should use same distance or same area in the same time. So in both cases, area should be same. Here area is integral v dt from 0 to t, and here area is if you went with some constant speed, which happens to be average, v constant into t. So from here that constant speed turns out to be, this is what I call as average. So what is average speed? Average speed is that constant speed with which you would travel same distance in same time. If you use that idea, then you get the definition of average. And it's not just for speed or velocity or whatever. You can use it for any quantity which changes with time. So average value of a quantity is integral that quantity from t1 to t2, because you are trying to find average from t1 to t2, and you divide with that time interval, which is t2 minus t1. If you want average value of some vector quantity v of t, you can also do that. V of t dt, you are finding average from t1 to t2 by t2 minus t1. This is how average is calculated. For example, if you talk about average speed, it is speed integrated over time by time interval. You can even write t1 to t2. Average velocity is velocity integrated over time by time interval. So that's the idea behind the average. Now, of course, speed integrated over time happens to be distance traveled, which we will see in another video. So distance traveled by time gives you average speed. Similarly, velocity integrated over time gives you displacement, and displacement by time gives you average velocity. So I think how to calculate average is very clear now. We will be using this integral method of calculating average if the function is continuous. We don't use initial plus final by 2. It's not always correct also. This initial plus final by 2. We will see that later with different examples. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.